MLB DFS Tuesday, June 18th. Who are the top pitching options? What are the best stacks? Let's quickly go through it, try to save you some time and help you get your DFS day started. And we will start with the salaries. We do not have elite options like we did on Monday. Sonny Gray yesterday, Paul Skeens yesterday. There are some high-priced pitchers, but you by no means have to go to them. I do like Tanner Houck in the spot he is in. Obviously, all of his numbers check out. He is having a great season. 25% K rate, not walking batters, generating ground balls. What more can you ask for? His skills interactive ERA, extremely low, and he also has a good ERA. And he's facing a team that doesn't really hit that well in Toronto. They're at the bottom of our list. Nice Woba WRC plus. Well, they're not the worst, but not that great. They don't strike out as much, but he still strikes batters out. His last start, kind of shaky, but not really a concern. Yeah, he did give up 8 hits, but he did ultimately get the win, and that was in a tough matchup against Baltimore. If you want to pay up, I don't think you need to pay up. Logan Webb, also checking the boxes. Good Sierra. Would like to see a higher strikeout rate, but the benefit of Webb, as opposed to Houck, is he has a better matchup against the Cubs, a weaker hitting offense, and much colder. Now, Toronto's been pretty cold over the last 7 games as well with a 0.96 ISO, but the Cubs have been even weaker. 253 WOBA, 62 WRC plus over the last week. Webb, rough matchup in his last start. He's faced a couple difficult teams lately, but he is still pitching well. And if you look at Webb, when he is faced up against weaker teams, that's when he puts up the massive numbers. But still in tough matchups, putting up decent numbers as well. Framber Valdez, the knock on Valdez is and always will be, he doesn't strike out enough batters. He's a ground ball pitcher. And so, but even that being said, typically a pitcher like that who is relying on those situations won't really have a great Sierra, but he does. Either way, we know who he is, and we know how he gets by. And he is in a terrific matchup against the White Sox. And if you look at games where he faces inferior opponents, which absolutely the White Sox are, over the last 10 days, that's where he's been able to generate 40-point games. At 9,300 in this matchup, a minus 220 favorite, low over-under, you could easily see him going 8 or 9 innings, just generating ground ball after ground ball. Yeah, he probably isn't going to get a lot of strikeouts, but he's going to get a lot of outs, limit runs, limit hits. Can he get into trouble at times? Yeah, but do you expect him to get into trouble against a White Sox team with a 289 WOBA and a WRC plus of 85? Probably not. They're not hitting left-handed pitching. It is a place you can attack. They strike out a lot, and I know he's not a strikeout pitcher, but when you go 8, 9 innings, you're just going to get there through volume alone. It's not going to be as efficient as some of these other elite pitchers that may only go 6 innings and strike everybody out. But you add 2 more innings, he can get there. All right, then, if you don't want to pay up, where are other pitching options? Alec Marsh, Kansas City, another one of the young arms for Kansas City, slowly developing. Not the greatest stuff, but good stuff, and good stuff against an Oakland team that does not hit and strikes out at a 27% clip. 292 WOBA. Not hitting well over most recent games. Marsh's last game, 7 innings pitched and 7 strikeouts. Only allowed 1 hit in his last start. 7,600 favorite, a 7.5 run total on this. You're going to save some money with Marsh. The numbers are fine. Look, 393 Sierra, 363 ERA, 23% K rate, not the highest on the slate. Maybe he doesn't generate enough ground balls. Maybe he's giving up a little bit of hard contact. But generally, Oakland's ballpark can play average. Although right now it's checking out as a really favorable spot. But I think that's mainly because of Oakland's lineup this year. But we can go even cheaper to a pitcher that I really like in Spencer Schwellenbach. Atlanta's pitching staff dealing with rotation injuries. This kid looked great in single A, or high A, and in double A, and they just immediately called him up. So they rushed him up a couple weeks ago, and you look at his numbers. What do you see in Schwellenbach? 451. Sierra, 632 ERA. The K rate's not that great. Well, first of all, he jumped from double A to the majors, and he's only pitched 3 games. And in those 3 games, he has drawn some very tough matchups. Baltimore being one of them. But even that being said, in his last game, he went 6 innings, and he only allowed 2 earned runs. And I believe that was against Baltimore. Now he draws the opposite in a matchup with Detroit. Detroit strikes out 24% of the time. ISO's up there a little bit, and that could be a concern in Atlanta because that park's going to start playing a lot smaller. And he is giving up a little bit of fly ball, but again, that's a small sample size situation. He hasn't given up too much hard contact, though. Ultimately, I have no problem attacking Detroit with Schwellenbach. Think that he's going to really start to kick it into gear. We look at what Detroit has done over the last week. They are playing a little bit better, but ultimately, I'm just leaning towards this top prospect that got called up, had some tough matchups. This is where he really starts to get into his groove. A little risky, but you got to find some savings. And as we talk about some of the stacks like Colorado and Los Angeles, you got to save somewhere. The other cheap option that we'll look at is Tobias Myers. Spent a lot of time in the minor leagues, finally got called up this year. Not bad. Starts the season as a rookie, has some good starts, has some not so great starts, but not terrible. But then you look at what he's done over the last 2 weeks. He's really kicking it into the gear. In his last start, got another win, 6 innings pitched, 4 strikeouts, 3 hits, only 1 earned run allowed. If you go back to the start before that, I believe he went 8 innings, got the win, maybe gave up 2 hits, piled up the strikeouts. Last 2 fantasy games have been very strong for him. Overall, his stats aren't that great. He is just a rookie, but he is getting the job done. 3.76 ERA, a 22% K rate, not the worst, which actually is kind of high for a guy with just an 8% swinging strike rate. You really like that he's limiting hard contact. And again, as I mentioned, Los Angeles, not that strong against right-handed pitching. 302 WOBA, 93 WRC+. They are a little hot of late. 134 WRC+ over last week. It is a bit of a concern. But I think that also might have been that Los Angeles ran into some really favorable matchups against some really weak pitching. I'd have to go back and double check. Now, let's talk stacks. And we might explore some of the lineups. Milwaukee versus Griffin Canning. Canning, a 495 Sierra. Not striking batters out. Ground ball rates, not the worst. Hard contact's not the worst. It is not very good. It's in Milwaukee, so we've got a hitter's ballpark. Milwaukee is hitting well. WOBA, WRC+, checking out. If we look at Canning, I believe his home run rate's one of the highest on the slate. 1.6 home runs per 9. xFIP's 499. Definitely a place to attack. And as I highlighted again, just 6 Ks per 9. Pitching to a lot of contact in a hitter's park. Definitely like Milwaukee at the home spot. Or actually, that's in Los Angeles. And Los Angeles isn't the worst place. Actually, Los Angeles is playing pretty home run friendly. So not Milwaukee, but still a park that has been favorable to hitters this season. Obviously, the Dodgers, I don't need to explain this. You stack Dodgers, period. You stack Dodgers when they're playing in Colorado. Atlanta, again, as I mentioned, I think this ballpark's going to start playing a little bit smaller as these summer season kicks in the Southeast. Atlanta's lineup hasn't been great this year. They still have pop, but they are heating up of late. 194 ISO over the last week. The WOBA is up. 115 WRC+. Strikeouts are still there. That's the beauty of this matchup. Casey Mize is a good pitcher. But the thing that Casey Mize doesn't do is strike out batters. 15% K rate, 8% swinging strike rate. He's allowed to put the ball in play. If you really want to take advantage of how Atlanta has struggled this season, it's with strikeouts. So if Atlanta is making contact, Atlanta could really surprise Casey Mize. Obviously, Colorado is going to always be an option. You don't really like stacking Colorado, but in Coors, if you can get them at a discount, which you can because they're not playing well this season. They're striking out. They're not hitting well. 80 WRC plus. Imagine that. The Rockies have an 80 WRC plus and play half of their games. Coors Field. And even if, 302 WOBA, what is going on? And that's not adjusted for any sort of fielding independent metrics. So yeah, it is hard to stack all of the cores, but you can always take a couple of the players there. And one of the reasons why we really want to go after Buehler, although he's been a lot better than I thought he would be after his Tommy John surgery, he still isn't striking out a lot of batters. He's pitching to a lot more contact, which is typically one of the things that we see. The ERA in the Sierra are not very good. He's getting wins, and he is getting enough ground balls, but he is allowing a lot of contact. He's allowing hard contact. And if you're not completely stacking against them, the benefit of taking maybe a couple of the Rockies is we look at the home runs per 9 for Buehler, and that's been killing him this year. 2.2 home runs per 9. That's just not going to get it done. Like I said, he's doing a pretty good job of generating ground balls. But when the balls go in the air, look at that 23% home run to fly ball rate. That is dangerous for Coors. So maybe you don't want to stack all of the Rockies, but there's going to be home run options in that lineup. Minnesota against Aaron Savali. Good pitcher. High strikeout rate. You like what you see from him. But Minnesota's got a couple guys that are smoking the ball. 169 ISO. Savali not really limiting the air balls, not really keeping the ball in the ground. So this is a place where we look at Minnesota and say, I think I can chase some home runs here, especially when you look at what Minnesota is doing. And a lot of this is Royce. When Royce comes into the lineup, things have changed. But even Carlos Correa had a 2 home run game recently. They are crushing the ball. You don't have to stack all of Minnesota, but some exposure, taking a couple of these hitters from Minnesota, chasing the home run. And we'll look, Savale is closer to 2 home runs per 9. 1.7 home runs per 9. Good place to chase a home run. I think that's the last stack that we need to talk about. Well, you can also consider the Mets against Lorenzen, who doesn't really strike out a lot of batters, just a traditional guy who just gets out. As you can see, the Sierra pretty high, but the ERA pretty low. And that's mainly because, the Skills Interactive loves to see guys that strike people out and not necessarily ground balls. And so there is a situation where Lorenzen could be fine. And the Mets have not been that great this season, but they have been good of late. 134 WRC plus over the last week, 351 WOBA. The Mets lineup is waking up, and there's some spots in the lineup where you can attack Lorenzen. And it's just a way to go in a different direction because everyone's probably going to love Minnesota. Everyone's going to take some Rockies possibly, Dodgers, and also Milwaukee. So if you want to look for a different stack to go to, that's there. I also like Baltimore because it's just Baltimore. Nestor Cortez is not a bad pitcher, but Baltimore, one of the knocks on them this season was, they got too many lefties in their lineup. They're not going to be able to hit lefties this year. They didn't fix it in the offseason. And they did start out the season really struggling against left-handed pitching. But they have turned it on, which makes these numbers really quite special. A 195 ISO versus lefties, 341 WOBA, and a 124 WRC plus. And that takes into account a pretty slow start to the season versus lefties. And you've got a pitcher in Cortez who gives up a lot of fly balls. And he's not completely limiting the hard contact. And we're playing in favorable ballparks. So I don't mind. I mean, it's Baltimore. You don't really need to overthink that. And so if we look at our stacks, just look at the lineups real quick and run through some of the people that we might see. So we'll start with that Baltimore lineup. And you just look at the ISO and the WOBA from these hitters right here up to the top of the order. They all check out. Adley, Gunner, they're all in good spots. They all hit well. Could be a long night for Nestor Cortes. Don't really need to explain Baltimore to you. Then we look at the Casey Mize situation. Marcell Ozuna, if you're looking for the guy that looks best on the page. Kelenic jumping to the top of the lineup. Really does well in split situations. Finally out of Seattle and kicking it into gear. 3,200 at the top of the order. As an opposing team, you're going to get 5 at-bats from him. You'll probably maximize your bats in this split against Mize, so don't mind. And then I know Olsen and Riley, you might feel like you're overpaying based on the numbers they produced, but they are starting to warm up. Definitely like Atlanta. Oh, wait, they're not in Detroit. They're not in Atlanta. They're in Detroit. Well, so that makes me even more excited about Mr. Schellenbach. Actually, I double-checked that. They are in Atlanta. That's what I thought. This backup sheet had the wrong thing. Damn you, backup sheet. Minnesota against Tampa. Never mind Willie Castro. He's fine. But really, it's Royce Lewis. Carlos Correa hitting big of late. But really, I know we don't have a huge sample size with Royce Lewis, but I don't care. Since returning from the IL, he's just been absolutely a monster. 571 WOBA versus right-handed pitching. Yeah, we would love to take lefties as well, but you've got plenty of lefties right there if you want to stack Minnesota. So we go down to our Mets. JD Martinez heating up. Pete Alonso heating up. Don't mind them at all in the spot. We get a little bit of splits benefits with the top of the order. So for the Mets, if I'm getting a little different, I just want to stack the top. I don't need to explain the Dodgers. You know what you're getting here. You know who Austin Gomber is by now. Stack Dodgers wherever you can. Rojas taking over for Betts. He's had some pretty good games lately. Splits are in his favor. If Vargas plays, I don't think he will. It's a small sample size here. I know you see like, 571 WOBA. He had 9 plate appearances. I don't know if you're going to get him in the lineup. Obviously, you're going to have to get exposure to the bottom of the Dodgers order if you're trying to stack because it's just such an expensive stack. Although it's not quite as expensive as it was yesterday. A little bit of a discount for whatever reason. And then if you want to go after Walker, Ezekiel Tovar, also almost a Rookie of the Year player last season, having a good season with the 202 ISO, 356 WOBA. Maybe one of the next great shortstops in the major league. McMahon. You don't really love playing Blackman or any of the Rockies, and rightfully so. But there's a really good chance that Buehler's going to give up a home run. You want to be on the right side of that. And preferably, I guess you take a lefty, but you don't mind taking Tovar. And then we look at our last stack, which is Milwaukee against Griffin Canning. And you know the candidates here, all right there in the meat of the order. Plenty of opportunity to bash one out. Thanks for joining me. Leave a like, subscribe, share.